So we're just going to give a few minutes to for folks to enter the meeting. I see a couple of folks are kind of trickling in. Sometimes Zoom gets a little weird and like lets people sit there for a minute. So we'll see where that leaves us. Okay. So again, those of you that have joined us, I'm Moshaty. I'm the live Q&A host for HorrOrigins. And I've got Josh Millican over here from Dread Central. Josh, if you want to introduce yourself to the folks.
Sure, Josh Millican from Dread Central, editor-in-chief over there. I'm also the host of Chronic Horror, which is your show for exploring the intersection of horror movie fandom and cannabis culture. And I'm really happy to be here with the writer and director of Relic.
Yes. We have Miss Natalie Erika James and Christian White of Relic, which is so good. I did myself watch it for 4 whole times. So
wow.
I'm just really excited. I just couldn't get it. Just visually, it's very sexy to me. So I couldn't get enough. It was really, 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 really great. But as people slowly get in, I really wanted to really just begin. You and Christian work very synergistically together. First day with my new tongue.
It was a challenging word. I wouldn't have even attempted.
Synergistically, yeah.
Good effort. So you work really, really well together. Can you tell me how that creative relationship started between you two?
Yeah. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, either way. We live in the same city, actually, in Melbourne, but we met halfway across the world in Palm Springs at the film festival there. So Christian's wife, Summer, had a short, and I had a short playing. And as Australians do, you kind of gravitate towards each other, and we just spent a week drinking together, didn't we?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And then we kind of kept in touch, but not, weren't really catching up back home. But Christian happened to work at a t-shirt shop on my street. This hole in the wall kind of thing, where he'd print out t-shirts. So yeah, we just kept talking, and both discovered that we loved horror, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, it was a very kind of organic. It just all happened very organically. I was working at this t-shirt shop. Nat walked past, and I think we started talking, and I think I may have said, "Oh, I'm interested in writing," and you were like, "Oh, I want to write a horror," and it was just very, very easy. It all happened from there. And lately, since we've been getting asked these kind of questions, it's occurred to me how differently it could have gone. It was because as co-writers, Nat and I we've never had a fight, we've never had a violent disagreement or anything like that, and it's all just been very, very easy and organic, and it's always been egoless, and the best idea wins, and it could have very easily gone in a different direction.
Yeah, it's interesting talking to friends of mine who are looking for something similar, like directors who are looking for co-writers, and they always say like, "Oh, how do you find someone?" And I think maybe it's just like you have to like them as people, of course, but trialing with a short script is a good way to go as well. And I remember we trialed our working relationship with a short that we never made, but that was kind of how we started, and then we went on to do Relic when that went really well, even though we never made it.
I think a lot of the difficult pieces is finding somebody that you can collaborate with that's okay with being like, that's not great, that's not a great idea, and having
right. Yeah. We probably are more constructive. If anything, we are probably the first to go, this is probably not great, but what
often if we're pitching an idea to each other, we'll have this big disclaimer at the start, and we'll often say something like, a better version of this. We apologize before we even pitch the idea.
This is the shit version.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we say that a lot to one another. So I think that that probably helps that we so self-deprecating, and we're nice to each other. We're just mean to ourselves. So I think that
it's mutual.
Is that the secret? Is that the secret to success?
I think that's the secret. Yeah.
Just be like, that was shit. Thank you for
exactly.
Time.
But it's so great to have a co-writer, and you really share your wins, but also like when you fail, your failures as well. So you get to like celebrate with someone, but you don't take it as hard when things don't work out.
Yeah, it's something, you know, because I write books as well. Now that's sort of what I do mostly. That's sort of what I do for a living now, and the film stuff, of course. But that in comparison, writing alone is so, you know, when you put something out there and you get a bad review, it's just all on you. Whereas when you're part of a, you know, when you're part of a team, it's sort of, it's almost like you have this safety net. And there's things that I would send to Nat, you know, because the way we work, we kind of, we get in a room and we talk through the ideas, and then we trade the drafts back and forth. So we're never actually physically writing in the same room. We go and do it separately and pass it back and forth. And I've sent Nat things that I would never show anyone else. Like that, it's some of it's so bad and rough, but you feel like you have this this safety net and this barrier between you and the outside world. So it's this really I don't know. It's a nurturing little relationship. It's quite good. And we're working on our next one now, and so far so good.
Good. Josh,
Can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
Yeah, Josh, do you have any questions for them to start?
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's dive into Relic, because there's a lot to unpack there. You know, you both have writing credits. Obviously, there's a personal connection to the subject matter. Could one or both of you talk about what it is, what personally you drew from to create this story?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we both have experiences with a grandparent who's gone through or is going through Alzheimer's and dementia. For me personally, I started writing it on a trip that I took to Japan to see my grandmother, and it was, I guess, notable because it was the first time she couldn't remember who I was. And so I had a lot of feelings of guilt about that, and in some ways, probably the writing was a way to process those feelings. And I'd always been kind of scared of my grandmother's house growing up as well, because I'd spend all my summers there, and she lived in quite this, you know, traditional Japanese house. And because I was such an Asian horror fan, I think, you know, it was particularly scary for me being back there. And I think, yeah, those two things kind of came together, and that was kind of the starting point. And then we developed it further from there.
Yeah, we drew, you know, I'm in a similar situation where my grandmother's still alive. She's just turned 100, crazily enough. And when you're a Commonwealth country like us, you get a letter from the Queen when you turn 100. It's this really, you know, this whole thing. But for the last 10 years or so, she's just been, her mind is completely gone, you know. So, yeah, I think we drew a lot on that. And an interesting thing happened. We were talking about this recently on something else. An interesting thing happened where the writing was a really cathartic experience. We drew so much on real life, and there were certain scenes that were really emotional and really difficult. But I find now when I watch the movie, I'm really proud of the movie, and I'm emotionally affected by it. But I find that I've sort of, through the writing, been able to process and purge a lot of the sort of the more difficult things. Yeah. So it's kind of, it really did. I think writing is such, you can look back at as your body of work grows, you can look back and really, you know, psychoanalyze yourself. And I really think that was something that we were both working through.
Well, I saw that actually, very profound. You know, this is going to be a difficult film to talk about because we don't want to spoil anything for anyone here who might not have seen it. But, you know, when I was looking at the final scene and kind of the message and the emotion, I almost felt like what the film was saying was, you know, when you're afraid of something, it's a monster. But when you face it, it's becomes something real, something that you can hold close, something that you can lie with, something that you can deal with. So that came through, and it absolutely speaks to the healing power of art, not just for those of us who consume it, but for those of you who make it. Natalie, something that you mentioned, it was interesting that you mentioned being afraid of your grandmother's house, because this is one of those films where the location, the house, is definitely like a character in and of itself. Before you guys hopped on, Mo and I were debating about whether or not the house has supernatural qualities to it. I want to hear about the actual house where you guys filmed, and also about the importance of the house as a character and what it represents.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely has presence. And, I think for me, the hoarding was a big part of it, because my grandma, in her decline, hoarded a lot. And I think that was, for me, the first image for Relic, this idea of like a hoarding space and it being filled with someone's memories. And the idea that, it was slowly warping, and in this case, kind of a space that just kept continuing outside the bounds of the reality of the house. So effectively like bigger on the inside. So, 100% you can read the house as being emblematic of the grandmother's mind, her memories, the experience of dementia, and the Alzheimer's kind of warping her mind, much in the way that the mold warps the house and, affects the spatial dimensions just as much as the decay and the rot of the house itself as well. In terms of the set, it was a combination of 2 locations and a build on a soundstage. And one of the locations was the exterior, one was most of the downstairs rooms, and then the set build was the upstairs bedrooms and the labyrinth space itself. And initially it was a much bigger set, I have to say, but we were completely over budget. So we had to kind of take a red pen to a lot of it. And in the end, I think it
still
ended up
huge.
Oh, I know.
Great. Yeah.
Well,
Part of it is the repetition, of course, which happens with people with Alzheimer's a lot, that they seem to kind of go in loops, so their mind works in loops. So we wanted that sense to be built into the architecture of that set as well. But yeah, man, if you saw it, it was like 2 hallways that we just had to keep, shooting over and over. And my production designer, Stephen Jones Evans, was a bit of a genius. Like, he made it modular so we could, reset a section to make it look slightly different. Logistically, it's a nightmare to shoot because you have to, change the set in the middle of the day. But yeah, that was kind of how we pulled it together.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think what's really beautiful about it. My sister worked in geriatrics for over a decade, so she's seen the cognitive decline of dementia is just really insidious. It just takes over. And the rawness of it, and you do see the mirroring in, the house's decay, in Edna's decay, with her human side, and just the mental wherewithal of everything. And we talked a little bit about catharsis with this, and is it easier now to look at the issues that Natalie, your grandmother, was having, and Christian, your grandmother's currently having? Is it cathartic now to look at that and from a different perspective now, to kind of wash it out a little bit and deal with it a little bit more as easy as you can, I should say?
Yeah, there's a few. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, I think that I'd see it more from a different, when we were writing it, because of our age, Nat and I, early on, we sort of were trying to tell a story from Sam's perspective, the youngest, the youngest character. And what we realized during the writing process is it just worked much better, sort of putting most of it from Kay's perspective, the mother. And ever since that, now when I think about my own grandmother, I do see it much more from my mum's point of view. And I start to think, this is the most bleak, depressing thing, but I start to think of, the idea of what my mum's going through, and just how me and my brothers and sister, there's a very good chance, if it's genetic, that cycle will happen, and we'll be doing that. We'll be doing that as well. So it's a very bleak topic. I don't want to bring it down, but I do really think about that a lot more. I guess earlier I had a sort of a much more personal perspective, and now I'm just, I'm more empathetic toward my mum and my aunt when I think about it now, I guess. God knows if that answered the question.
No, I think maybe the process, like the catharsis, is kind of tied up in process, and so it's very much in, because when you write a script, you're redrafting constantly, and you find things along the way. And I remember, Christian, how we are, during the writing of the script, which was about 4 years or 3.5 years, both of our sets of grandparents kind of went into nursing homes. So our view on that whole experience changed from our first draft to, you know, what's finally in the film. So I think, yeah, it's really interesting when you think about how the whole thing about life feeding into art, feeding into life, kind of that for me was really true, that everything that I was going through was feeding into the script, and then vice versa was kind of coming back to me. So it's hard to separate, you know, that process from the final product and go, oh yeah, now having watched it, I see, you know, here are the truths that I've mined. It's more like, no, the whole process of the thing has been, you know, processing, I guess.
Yeah, and there's also this weird thing that happened where, you know, your grandparent would do something that was really sad and depressing or weird, and you'd have to process that. And it's awful, but you'd also think, oh, that would be a cool scene, you know. So it was this really horrible thing. You know, I remember my nan has a problem with putting things in her mouth. Like they've had to take batteries away from her and things like that she puts in her mouth. And there's a scene, without spoiling anything, there's a scene in the movie where Edna puts something in her mouth. And so there's all these little things that you kind of, it was partly processing, but it was also partly, wow, this would make a cool story. So you kind of, for me, I sometimes separated those things, and watching the film, it kind of all merged back into one, if that makes sense.
It's also a whole other experience watching the film with your family, I found, because Sundance, our premiere, was the first time my parents had seen it, and they both came over to Park City to watch from Australia. And I was kind of shitting myself because I was like, oh fuck, what if they hate it? You know, I've, you know, taken this really personal experience and made it into a film. But they loved it. And I feel like it actually, kind of cheesy to say, but probably like brought us closer. And yeah, it was all very tied up in everything for me because my grandma only passed in November last year. So it was like very tight timeline wise, but yeah. Yeah,
I've been having a similar thing with when it came out, it came out on a streaming service over here, and my mum watched it, I don't know, in the first week watched it over and over and over, and she would call me, and she would, you know, because it's not a it doesn't hold the audience's hand. It's a you know, it's metaphorical, and it doesn't give you all the answers. And she would call me and say, oh, this represents, so the house represents this and this and this. And then, which was really thrilling in itself. But then she would start to, I think she shielded, or she's attempted to shield a lot of what's going on with my grandmother from me. And she's been, since the movie, she's let that wall down, and she's revealing a lot more. So I think it created this environment for her where she can, just talk about that more. So it's been a really, yeah, it's a strange thing. Cause you know, you, for me, we wrote the script, oh God, you know, years ago. And then, you know, Nat went and had to make the thing, but really I came to set once and kicked back and, you know, dusted off my hands. So it's such a long time ago. And so experiencing it coming out and people's reactions has been a really, really cool thing. And it has been cathartic.
And I think that's wonderful that you both had the answer that, Natalie, it brought you closer to your family, and Christian, it brought you closer to your mother, kind of evaporated that wall between it. It's interesting what that art can do. So obviously cathartic for everyone that has, you know, dipped into this situation with you, both on a familial aspect. And for me, like going back to something like Cresswick, very much that familial bond, that theme something that is just energetic for you? Is that something that you like to follow, that tight familial theme?
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't really see the trends in your work until you take a step back and you know, someone asks you a question like that. But I think for me, I'm always really drawn to ideas surrounding mortality. And I think probably that is inherently tied to the person who gives you life. Right. So yeah, I'm definitely, when I think about all the stories that, or the films or whatever that appeal to me, I'm definitely very drawn to the parent-child relationship and how it pertains to death. Because that sounds, but in the idea of inheritance and cycles and all that kind of thing, that's my bag.
Yeah.
What about you?
I've forgotten the question. I was just laughing in my head thinking over here it's 11 a.m. in the morning on a Tuesday morning. It's just so funny to be just talking about death and decay. And for me, yes, I just remember the question. I'm always drawn to stories about family. I think for similar reasons, to you, Nat. I think it's, I think the older you get, your position in the family changes, and as you get older, you occupy a different space than you did as a kid. And I'm really interested about, I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm really interested in about things like that. But also, as a writer, writing families just logistically is so good because you don't have to really, it's so easy to put them in the same room. You don't need an excuse. And, with a lot of things you want tension, and a good script should have tension, and families have that. They've got a built-in, you can argue like, a crazy person with your sister, but you're still going to go to Christmas together and you're still going to be in a room together. So I think there's something really interesting about that and convenient when you're writing, just kind of, I don't know, all that stuff is already there and everyone knows, most people most people have a family and have tension within that family. And it's a language that everyone, I think, feels and understands. And so I think, that's sort of what draws, because now that I think about it, most of the stuff I write is about just connections between family and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess your issues are so deeply rooted, but also at the same time really banal. You know what I mean? Like there's no, and so there's an interesting contrast in that you feel there's so much love, but there's so much room for tension as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that what's great about it, especially with Relic, is you definitely get the dynamic between Kay and Sam. You just get it, or you just kind of get the tension is already kind of there. Like there's just this unspoken static between the two of them, and we don't need any backstory as to how it got there. You're just like, that's me and my sister, or that's me and my mom. Because my mother will argue with me till the cows come home, and then she'll be like, I'm going to breakfast.
Yeah.
So that's I really liked that about it, and especially it's like you just see yourself in that, and I think that's great. But for me, like the last 20 seconds for me in this movie, it's just very, very poignant and just really, really beautifully shot. And without really spoiling anything, but how dementia kind of takes over, and how you like Josh had said, you almost sit with it, and the acceptance is kind of there as to how you deal with it, and it's very raw and very frenetic at the same time. Is there anything that you wish, when you look back at it, is there any parts of it where you're like, I could have done this differently, or maybe we should have added this? Is there anything that you cut that you're like, that would have added something extra to the film?
Oh, look, I mean, full disclosure, I have not seen the film in full since it premiered at Sundance, and only because I had to sit through that screening. And for me, I find it really hard to watch my own work because I'm constantly looking at what I should have done and all the mistakes I made and all that kind of stuff. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about any question.
I know what when every now and then, with my books, I'll do a reading or something. And when I'm reading it, it's the worst thing. I hate it. I just look at all the things I should have changed. But with this, I am super proud of it. And I think it's because,
some separation.
And really the writer is it's an important part, but it is just a part of the machine of filmmaking. And I think that, Nat had to do all the hard work, and really I just kind of put it out of my mind and then got to go and enjoy it. I'm really, I'm really proud of it. I don't think there would be anything that I would change. I think it's easier for me to be objective though. It's not as,
you didn't, I don't know, watch it 300 times in post.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think before watching it at Sundance, I think I'd watched an early cut once, and I think that was it. And so for me, it was just such a I really love it, and I'm very proud of it. And I think I don't know, I think Nat, she knows this, but I think she's a genius and did such an amazing, ridiculously incredible job. So no, I wouldn't change a thing.
I feel like we're writing Drumwave, what we've learned is what's going to get cut in the edit. I don't know if you feel the same, but I always feel that now, where when we were writing Relic, I couldn't have anticipated that. But now with hindsight, I'm like, oh no, this is 100% going to get cut. So
because when a lot got cut from Relic, and I think that, and it's better for it, but I think when it's on the page, you think every single scene is essential, and there was all these sort of little tangents that it went on that we thought was so important, and then you see it without them and realize you realize how little you actually need. And I think, like you said, with Drumwave, which is the feature we've just written a draft on for our next film. I guess I've learned a lot from that, and I'm sure there are scenes we've written that will definitely get cut, but you do carry a lot over. And I think the other big thing with Relic, we always had so much theme and so many cool ideas, but we didn't have a lot of plot. And I think with our second film, we've just got so much plot, because I think that was a reaction, I think, and now we've had to cut back a little of the plot because all this stuff is going to happen. So I think you do, I guess it's those sort of lessons that you take with you, but but I think, I'm pretty good at setting a finished product aside and being happy with it, and moving on. I think I tend not to dwell on mistakes, probably because I have a bad memory. I'm probably have early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh my God, Christian.
I know.
Don't put it out
honestly,
there.
it's such a fear of mine. We've been doing renovations, and we had a new pantry put in, and the amount of times I've called the pantry a wardrobe, I can't stop doing it. And I really worry that I don't know. We'll see.
I'm worried.
I'll have to do some.
We'll see, he says.
Nat will get a draft.
Your grandmother's 100, so we'll.
Yeah, she does.
Even
I've got a bit of time.
70 years. How it's going.
Fingers crossed.
Right? Josh, did you have any questions for Natalie or Christian before we turn it over to the audience?
Just one real quick one, because I know there are some great audience questions there. But I always look at a film's IMDb page in the trivia section, and this is what's in the trivia there. It says the movie uses sound effects to mimic sensorial and memory loss described by dementia patients. So how can sound mimic sensory loss?
I
had
did
no
not
idea.
write that.
I was going to throw that to you, Nat, and go, wow, that's genius. I had no idea you did that.
There was some, I guess, references that we had. We looked at a lot of William Basinski and his kind of deterioration loops. So there's a bit of that in terms of the sound or the score mimicking the deterioration that Alzheimer's can cause, but I'm not sure what that means. I'll take it. That sounds great. That's really intellectual.
Like it's genius on so many levels.
Great job.
Yeah, but we did work with some brilliant collaborators in the sound department. Brian Reitzel did the score, and he worked really closely with Rob McKenzie, who's a genius. And what was really cool was that we built this soundscape with a bunch of stuff that they individually recorded, and then they shared everything. So we had this library to work from, and they each did, their passes. A lot of it is kind of unusual non-orchestral sounds that were either recorded or, Brian makes his own instruments. He's got a spinning speaker that he records and he pushes sound out of, and he's like a scientist of his own sort. He's amazing. So it was, I guess there was little separation between the sound design and the score, and that was an intentional thing. And hopefully, it mimicked the, I guess, decline of Edna's.
Of course it did.
Yeah. Every intention.
Completely intentional.
Perfect. No, thank you so much for that. like Josh had said in the beginning, we were just like, I wonder what this meant, and this meant, and this meant. We definitely had a lot of enthusiasm with hearing from you guys. So thank you so much for the insight you've given us so far. So I'm going to turn it over to a couple of our audience members that had some really, really great questions. So with our audience members, when I call you out, I'm just going to have you open your video and your cam, and I'm going to have you just directly ask Natalie and Christian your questions. So Shelly, go ahead and ask your questions for Natalie and Christian.
Hi. Okay, so I'm trying not to give Hi, thank you. This is wonderful. Full disclosure, 2 women in my family tree suffered from Alzheimer's, so the movie was spectacular. But I was curious because I am a screenwriter, but I also am co-writing a feature with a director who's a writer-director. And I was curious about if you had peers or reviewers or producers looking at early drafts, and did you get a lot of challenges or pushback on the 3rd act? I'm trying not to spoil things, but there's definitely a pacing genre style change up from you know, J-style house to once they go into the closet to the last 5 minutes. And I didn't know if collaborators were like, what the fuck? Or if you kind of had creative free reign to kind of explore these themes.
Yeah. What was the first part of the question again?
Just kind of pushback. Yeah, producers or
scripts.
Funders or yeah.
Yes, we developed it through the Australian system. So the government kind of funds development, and you do it through rounds. So we probably did about 4 rounds, which meant that our producers, Australian producers, Carver Films, were reading all the drafts as well as the funding bodies, you know, to give us money. And we did get pushback on, not so much in Australia, Christian, would you say? But when we started taking it out to the US, we definitely got some pushback. A lot of the notes were about pulling scares earlier into the script, which is fine in theory, but I think if the story hasn't earned those scares, you kind of feel the writer's hand a bit too much. But for me, what worked was probably having comps and arguing your case on them. So I think Kill List was something that I brought up a lot because it similarly has this kind of, you know, really tense but slow burn structure to it. And then it just goes off at the end and it's kind of comes out of nowhere. So yeah, I found that really useful to have just comps that you could point to and go, they did it, it worked, you know,
awesome.
Let's try it.
Yeah. And we're pretty lucky. We worked with a lot of people that their notes weren't necessarily aligned all the time, but most of the people we worked with got the project. And, you know, sometimes you get notes and whether you take them or not, or whether they're helpful or not, you can tell by the notes whether or not they understand the project. And sometimes the notes would be perfect. Other times they would, we wouldn't necessarily take that direct advice, but they would point to a problem in the script. So we're pretty lucky. We worked with a script editor as well. And that was a really good, she really pushed us. And her notes would come in the form of questions. And she would say, well, you did a great job by talking about it and being vague, by the way, because I almost spoiled something then. But, you know, she would ask us a question about the, you know, the motivation of the antagonist, for an example. And we would just have to kind of come up with the answer. And because so often you write things and you just don't know why. You know, some things are really well thought out, and other things you just don't know why they happen. And when you're just asked simple questions, sometimes you're forced to either, you know, come up with an answer or say, oh, I don't know, we should explore that and we should think about that, and from that new ideas come from. So yeah, I think we're pretty lucky in that it was never, especially with our Australian producers, it was really story first, and as long as the story was good and the characters were believable, that was sort of pretty aligned.
Yeah, the notes weren't so prescriptive. It was probably more about us looking at the trends in the notes. And even with our Aussie producers, there's 2 of them and they don't always agree. So it kind of gives you a bit of leeway to just, look at the underlying condition, not the symptom, and the note that attaches to that. So.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I'm gonna screw this up because I have a friend that pronounces it both ways. Steven or Stefan? Which one is it? Correct me.
That's Stephen.
Steven, hit
Yeah.
it.
But hi, I just wanted to thank you for making the film. Making movies is difficult, and you guys did it, so that's fantastic. But I also wanted to thank you for doing this Q&A, because that's fantastic as well. But my question was, the script has a lot of these wonderful symbols, a lot of symbolic and thematic imagery, a lot of these things. I kind of want to stay vague about it, and I don't know, sometimes whenever you write, you kind of just make up symbols on the fly, and sometimes you just have them like baked into your personality or so. I was just wondering how you made them up and kind of organized some of them.
I think it's really the way Nat's brain works. So one of the notes we did get, which is hilarious, was too many motifs. We always had too many. There was too many things like that, and I think it's the way. And I think this is why Nat and I are a good team. I'm more of I'm sort of a nuts and bolts guy. That's how I kind of operate and how my mind operates, and I have to think things through chronologically. Whereas Nat, she has this very, it's like I'm talking about you and you're not in the room. Nat has a very visual, thematic point of view. And I think the way your mind works, Nat, is that you sort of think in symbol and metaphor first and draw things from there. Nat will write sort of out of sequence and all this sort of crazy stuff. And I think all of that comes from Nat's wonderful brain. I can't take credit for any of those.
Too many motifs for sure. I mean, for Relic in particular, I'm a big fan of Vanitas art, which deals with, I guess, the ephemeral nature of life and the inevitability of death, but all the beauty that's to be found within the truth of that. And I guess it felt like Relic was thematically really aligned with that, so we used a lot of those kinds of symbols, like, for example, rotting fruit, obviously, like the personification of death. What else? Candles, lights, those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Paul.
Hey.
First off, I think the movie was pretty fantastic. I enjoyed it very much. And I read the really good interview that Natalie had with Mary Herron in Fangoria.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of body horror in this movie. And you mentioned Cronenberg, you also mentioned K-horror and J-horror.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about a lot of, like, your favorite was Videodrome.
Right.
I also wanted to ask Christian, what are your influences in regard to this horror, to writing horror? Are you more in line with Natalie, or do you stray a bit off the path?
No, I haven't. Nat has a near encyclopedic knowledge of horror, which I don't as much. But all my horror influences are pretty classic. Stephen King is a huge influence on me, and the movies like The Shining, shows like The X-Files, all of that sort of stuff. Going back to the Blair Witch Project, I remember when the Blair Witch Project came out on, I guess it was video or DVD. I don't know what era that was. And I would actually would play it. There was a strange kind of, my wife and I talk about this a lot. There's a strange sort of coziness I feel with horror, and things like the Blair Witch Project. I would just watch. I would put it on to go to bed to go to sleep to. It was this weird sort of, I don't know. I kind of like those cozy. The Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is the same. It's terrifying, but it's also so cozy. They're in this hotel, and there's something kind of and
I know
fancy.
exactly what you mean about the coziness of horror.
Right?
If I'm unwinding, I will always put on a horror or a comedy.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it's like you understand the rhythms of it or something.
Yeah, they're sort of
What do you think?
terrifying, but also it is that rhythm. It's the sort of the music to them that kind of there's a a predictable unpredictability or something to them. So yeah, again, I've gone off track. The original question was about influences. Yeah, so I guess all the you know, all the classic stuff and a lot of TV. Like I said, the X-Files, that was a huge influence on me as a kid. There are certain episodes of the X-Files that I think would be the greatest horror movie of all time. You know, so it's really a lot. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but I kept talking so long that I sort of forgot about it. Now I'm just keeping talking and in the hopes that it'll make sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're a fan of like creature films too, no? Like you're a big fan of Bigfoot and.
Yeah, I love all of that sort of stuff, and I'm a huge paranormal nut. You know, I listen to paranormal podcasts, and I love you know, true crime, but when true crime sort of drifts into the paranormal, you know, like Missing 411, that sort of stuff, which is, you know, all these disappearances that happen in North America and all this kind of, all that kind of, you know, fringe stuff I'm really, really intrigued about as well. Urban legends, that kind of, that kind of thing. My YouTube algorithm is just full of, you know, often I'll, you know, in the afternoon, usually I'll just get onto YouTube and I won't search for anything. I'll just let it tell me what to watch. And I get so creeped out that my wife will come over and say, you know, do you want a cup of tea or something? And I'll jump because I'm so engrossed in all these creepy real things caught on camera and stuff like that. So yeah.
Great. Sounds awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Jonathan, go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Hey, Christian and Natalie, thank you so much for having
Jonathan.
us. Great movie. Really enjoyed it. My question is kind of more about your process going into the story. You know, I see in a lot of horror films, the tendency is to go for, you know, supernatural phenomena, demonic possession, things like that, when they're explaining horrific elements of the mind. So you're dealing with Alzheimer's here. You're dealing with a really touchy subject that can be horrific in and of itself, especially for close family members like you talked about. So I get in part of it, you know, I think you kind of talked about with Shelley is maybe the Australian perspective versus the American perspective, looking for more jumps, more scares, more gore maybe. But you did a great job of making it horrific and yet beautiful at the same time. So I don't know if you can talk to maybe that combination and balance between mental illness and true horror.
Yeah, there was a temptation, I think. We during the writing of the script, we struggled a lot trying to figure out we often talk about the antagonistic force is dementia and Alzheimer's and in a way death. And it took us a long time to figure out that the motivation of the antagonist, the motivation of, you know, what's the motivation of dementia, what's the motivation of death, and it was very, very tempting to have you know, the classic horror scenes where they go into a library and they figure it out and then they do an exorcism and it sort of solves those things. And we resisted that all the way along because we always wanted it to feel real and draw, I think, the horror from real life as opposed to, that fun temptation of just leaning into the supernatural. And we always went back to, you know, what would a manifestation of dementia look like? What is that? How would that act? And it was very challenging to do that, but I think we stuck to it, I think, and thankfully.
Yeah. And I also think you know, I've mentioned my love for Asian horror, but if you think about the conventions of that genre, a lot of the time the menace is often like a woman who's been wronged or someone who's been abandoned or neglected. And so there's a lot of empathy for the character as well, even though they're terrifying. And I think we wanted to create something similar with Edna's character and, you know, the menace itself, and that, you know, ultimately it's someone to feel compassion for as well. And I think that's where the element of beauty comes in, because I think with a lot of Asian horror, the beauty goes hand in hand with the horror. So yeah, I think that was definitely like a consideration of ours. But I think it comes down to compassion and love, you know, and steering away from a very like binary view of the world where it's good or evil that triumphs. Like, it's not that simple, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and that was why the ending, again, without spoilers, why the ending was effective is because we never wanted to sort of separate the dementia from Edna. You know, when you have a grandparent, they do act with dementia, they do act in a certain way, and at times it's horrific or scary or silly, and it's sort of tempting to look at them as yeah, exactly. And we wanted this thing to be a villain, but also the people who are running from it love it as well. And there was this strange kind of tension there that we kept going back to and made sure we never let ourselves off. You know, we never sort of let ourselves take the easy option, which was, I think, the right thing.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Kelly, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. It's a no camera sort of day for me, so I'm going to leave that off if that's okay.
Every day is a no camera day for me, really.
But firstly, thank you so much, Natalie and Christian, for being here today. This has been great. And Mo, thank you very, very much for organizing. So my questions are a bit more generic and less exciting than everybody else's, but I'm curious to know how you two have continued to collaborate in the midst of lockdown, and what sort of platforms, tools, and techniques you are considering for your current projects within our post-COVID world, and in particular, how those might be used to engage new audiences with the horror genre via themes that are very sensitive and personal, yet also very relatable and very real.
Yeah, I think the last draft we did of Drumwave was, I think it was right at the beginning of COVID, was it? Because the way Nat and I work, was it?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you go.
We finished it in May, I think.
Oh God, so yeah. I think you should answer this one, because I have no memory of how we wrote Drumwave.
Oh no. Look, we're pretty, in terms of the way that we work together during lockdown, there's nothing too innovative to speak to. We just kind of will, you know, prior to us having to socially distance, we would just, you know, go to each other's houses and have a few days or whatever to talk through the project. But now it's really just been checking in via phone or Zoom and, you know, passing the draft back and forth. We don't even share like an online doc. We just physically send the file just so that we've got the record of each one. Yeah, I guess. And then, you know, in between, like when we're talking, we'll send each other things that we find online, like images or stuff we've researched and found. What else? And then I guess moving forward, I mean, we started writing Drumwave 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Yeah. So it hasn't really changed because of the pandemic thematically, I have to say.
Yeah, and I guess the way we work sort of lends itself to a pandemic in a way. We do, like you said, we do when we can get in a room, but really that's a lot of what we do is when we get in a room, we plot everything out and we just go back and forth on the phone. Even before the pandemic, we do that a lot, and we'd, you know, each have a deadline. So, you know, I'd have to send Nat the draft by Friday, and so we were kind of prepared for it, because that's the way we work anyway, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, separately, like I'm part of a write club where we sit on Zoom like this, but we just write on mute, and then you have like 15-minute breaks every hour, and that's been really good, just having the social contract of needing to show up. And I definitely recommend it for anyone.
It's a strange pressure. You know, I don't know if everyone else is feeling this, but and I don't know what the situations are everywhere where you guys are, but you know, we're in what's called stage 4 lockdown at the minute. So there's a curfew, and we've got to wear a mask every time we leave the house, and you're just stuck at home all day. And there's almost this pressure to be more productive and to get all these writing projects done. And I found that quite overwhelming in the beginning. I felt, oh God, I've got to make the most of this time, you know. And for me, it's been letting myself off the hook a little bit and writing, but just letting myself experience what we're all going through as well. I think that I think that getting that right balance where you know, use your time wisely, but don't put pressure on yourself to you know, and don't, no unrealistic expectations. It's a weird time. Really weird time.
And I guess to answer the second part of your question, we kind of had Relic being released during the pandemic, so we really had to pivot this year in terms of, you know, how we showed it to audiences. And I think, you know, particularly for a horror film, you always have this idea that it's best viewed with people together in a theater, in the darkness of a theater. But we, in Australia, for example, we got bought by a streaming platform here. And in the end, it was actually really great because it just meant that more people got to see it and from the safety of their own homes. And similarly, in the States, IFC Midnight released it, and they showed it at a bunch of drive-ins as well as it being released on VOD. So I think they've really made the most of the scenario we're in, and probably it'll be the case that a lot more films, maybe, I mean, I'm just speculating, with theaters shutting down, that, you know, it'll be more of a streamer release. But that's not to say that, you know, you can't make it something special. And for Relic, at least, it's, it kind of far exceeded my hopes for the release. So it's great.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just very quickly, if I may, I apologize. I probably should have been clearer in the second half of that question. I suppose I should have phrased that as what sort of platforms, tools, and techniques are you considering to actually produce your current projects? Sorry, no, that's on me.
Platforms as in like software for the
well, just as an example,
like
just as an example, the Shudder film Host came out recently, and that was filmed entirely via Zoom. As an example, so, you know, so done using a platform that you know, could ensure safety and social distancing.
We haven't really thought of, you know, use Zoom as a potential recording device or anything like that. We haven't really changed our projects too much, have we?
No, and I think there's this sense
we'll be on hold until there's a vaccine, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I have a show in production with Netflix, and we had got the first 6 episodes shot, and then we were shut down. We've only got 2 episodes to shoot still, and we got shut down thanks to COVID. And right now we're in the middle of trying to figure out how the hell to start shooting again. And there's these logistical problems getting, you know, cast over from America and things like that. And I think this is a bit of a wait and see scenario. I think that I love that there's some really great innovative stuff coming out, and it's sort of almost guerrilla filmmaking style of stuff coming out. You know, I think the best films come as a result of limitations. You know, I think like the Blair Witch Project before, and even things like you know, the original Star Wars trilogy versus the prequels. It's like one had major limitations, the other one didn't. And I think that's a really exciting thing, and I think we'll see some really cool stuff. Having said that, I'm far too lazy. I've not even thought about all my. Well, luckily for that, a lot of what I do is write books, so it doesn't affect that too much. In fact, book sales are going up. But I think moving forward, we'll just have to hope the pandemic. You know, we might have to rewrite Drumwave to be all on Zoom, but hopefully not.
Oh God. Yeah, I mean, I have friends who are working on like TV shows in Melbourne, and they're still shooting, and they've kind of built in social distancing into their scripts, so that's quite interesting. And they're splitting up their crews so that if, you know, there's an outbreak on one crew, then the other could keep shooting. So obviously there's a lot of workarounds, but yeah, we're probably timing wise in the right spot because we're just developing right now. So
yeah. It'll see what a lot will depend on just what's coming, what's around the corner, and it's a bit of a wait and see at the minute for us. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. I'm sure it'll all work out fine.
Thank you both very much, and yes, I will definitely keep my fingers crossed for both of you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. Anne, go ahead and wrap us up for the evening.
All right. Hi, Natalie and Christian. I'll just also start by saying what the others have said and say thank you so much for this film and for doing the Q&A. I actually just watched it with my horror film group last night via Zoom, and we all loved it. That was the first movie we all like unanimously loved, so well done.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So my question for you guys, I'm kind of curious about how the script changed for you as you were taking it from script to screen, how the story changed, if there's anything that surprised you about the story or the characters during that process.
Yeah, it changed.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it changed dramatically. You know, originally it was a brother and sister character, and then it changed. You know, it changed. It went through a lot of changes. You know, the first draft we did, we wrote, you know, just on spec before we showed it to our producers. And looking back, it was just.
Have you read it?
I mean, no, but in my mind, it's just so bad.
We should get drunk one night and read it. That would be amazing.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it changed and evolved a lot. You know, but once we sort of landed on the you know, the 3 generations of women, that's when it felt like I think a lot of things slotted into place then, and we sort of. And then the ending as well, you know, the ending, so much in the script builds toward that ending. And, you know, that was all Nat. Nat just called me one day and had just came up with this ending. And, you know, it sent shivers down my spine. I was like, yes, let's just work to that. And as soon as that piece of the puzzle was in it, it felt like then we really hit the ground running. This is lip gloss, by the way. It just occurred to me that it looks like a tampon. Like, I promise. Yeah.
But I feel like the emotional core of the script was the same, even though all the superficial stuff around it, you know, changed drastically. And I guess from shooting script to, you know, what's in the final film, I mean, it's pretty similar. There's obviously some stuff that was cut in the editing process, some kind of like subplotty kind of stuff. But yeah, there wasn't too much rewriting. I think there was one scene when Edna's burying the photos. That scene we rewrote prior to shooting it, like the day before. And that was just through workshopping it with the actors and just feeling like there was a better version for it. So yeah, that was a really tricky scene in a lot of ways. Just super emotional. So
yeah, great. Thank you guys. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much to everyone that participated today. Again, thank you to Natalie and Christian for joining us so much. This has been great. So like I said, Josh and I were very enthusiastic in the beginning, making our own conclusion.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been so fun. Yeah.
No worries. Josh, do you have any other feedback for Natalie and Christian before we wrap up for the evening?
I mean, just to say thank you again. And, you know, I want to thank the people who asked questions. You know, this is the second one that I've done with Mo, and I'm just so surprised by the intelligence of the horror community and the people who are brave enough to ask questions. So thanks to you, and also thanks to all of our participants for making this a real valuable, worthy use of time.
Thanks. Thank you. So again, I'm Moshaty. I do the live Q&A for HorrOrigins. Josh Millican is the most fantastic wingman from Dread Central. Fantastic. Natalie, Christian, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. There's his monkey. Please let us know what you're doing, and we want to hear more about Drumwave and everything that's going on with that. So keep us posted on everything that you're doing if you can.
Thank you so much for having us. It's so fun.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.